Craigneuk scheme, nestled in between Motherwell and Wishaw in North Lanarkshire, has more than just a few stories to tell. In fact, it was probably one of the most violent and dangerous places to live in all of the UK at one point, during the 90s and the early 2000s, mostly because of two feuding prominent families and their associates in the area. The Nisbets, along with William Billy Longmire and the Murdochs. Glasgow and its suburbs, which Wishaw is, had a massive influx of immigrant families coming from Ireland, both north and south, looking for work in the 18 and 1900s. Looking for work in the many local ore and coal mines to start a new life because of the famine or lack of opportunities back home. North Lanarkshire is riddled with tough wee mining villages. One of the main sources of work in the area was the Ravencraig Steelworks, which sadly closed in 1992 after providing mass employment locally for well over 50 years. With a massive local employer closing its doors and new opportunities few and far between, with the poverty increase then came the inevitable increase in drugs to the area. Craigneuk was changing. The place was being flooded with heroin, blues and cocaine coming in from both Glasgow and Edinburgh, and the Nisbets and the Murdochs wanted to control the local drugs trade in North Lanarkshire, not just Craigneuk. The Murdoch family were seen as the established local hard cases, who had a few local businesses and a scrapyard. They also picked up local protection rackets from businesses. When the Nisbets, led by ambitious tobacco smuggling dad James and his sons, James Jr., Stephen, along with his nephews John Henry and Sean, as well as a host of loyal friends, started dealing on the same patch, it wasn't going to end well. It's alleged after a few tit-for-tat threats and a few bits of vandalism, one of the Murdochs walked into a local pub and put a gun to 18-year-old at the time Stephen Nisbet's head and told him to go back to his dad and tell him to stop selling drugs or else. This moment would trigger a 2-year bloodbath of unimaginable back and forth violence between the two feuding families. James Nisbet Sr. wasn't going to listen to the threats. He was unbothered. The Murdoch brothers John, William and Alan might have been the older, more established guys, but over the years, the Murdochs had done a lot of damage to residents in the local community and weren't well liked at all. Not that the Nisbets were much more popular either, but them along with a few other families had terrorised Craigneuk for years. But the Murdochs had changed the game, because they knew the Nisbets were a proper threat, and up till that point it had been knives and fists. The ante had been up with the gun being pulled on Stephen Nisbet. Members of the Nisbets attacked 61-year-old dad of the three brothers, David Murdoch. They'd beaten him so bad that he took a heart attack during it, but survived the savage beating. It was getting serious. The Nisbets had got guns of their own, but not only guns, explosives too. William Murdoch was shot in the head at his scrapyard, but the bullet only grazed him. A hand grenade was thrown at the front of his house. Shrapnel shattered his windows and damaged buildings. The Nisbets crew were a bunch of young crazy guys willing to do things like that, with nutcases like John Henry Nisbet, or Jai H as he was known. A few months had passed by after these incidents. 18-year-old cousins Stephen, John Henry and Sean got in a car and got tooled up with a handgun and went to Golf Hill Road, where William Murdoch lived. The three young cousins lay in wait up the street, then made their move as John Murdoch walked out onto the street. The gunman, which was alleged to be John Henry Nisbet, his face not even partially covered, got out the car and walked casually up the street and shot John Murdoch twice, who had turned around and tried to escape as he seen the gun pointed at him. As he did, he was shot in the base of his neck. The bullet hit a vertebrae and severed part of his spine, which would leave him paralysed from the neck down. The second shot Jai H fired hit John Murdoch's knee. William Murdoch heard the shot, so he ran outside to help his brother. He then chased after the shooter, and as he did, Nisbet then fired a third shot at William Murdoch, which hit his hand. While he was trying to make his escape, Nisbet disappeared up a lane and made his way back to the getaway car. The three teenagers were charged with attempting to murder both John and William Murdoch, but in true gangster fashion at the High Court in Glasgow during the 1993 trial, both Murdoch brothers never said anything that would incriminate the people who had allegedly just tried to kill them. They gave different accounts, so the stories wouldn't match up, so the Crown didn't have a case, and the three Nisbets walked on the attempted murder charges. That wouldn't be the end of it. The violence would only escalate, and the residents of Craigneuk were getting sick and tired of the constant running battles in the street between the two families and their known associates. The reality was the Nisbets were trying to wipe out the Murdochs. The feud would end with it claiming the innocent life of a 21-year-old local man, Douglas Bryce, during a 1994 attempt on Alan Murdoch's life. Douglas Bryce was apparently trying to help Alan Murdoch start his car when an unknown car approached and fired shots that hit Douglas on the neck and nicked his jugular. Alan Murdoch was hit on the leg during the attack. Douglas Bryce was helped to his family home where he bled to death in the garden. 3 men were charged with his murder and the attempted murder of Alan Murdoch: Billy Longmire, John McNeil and Derek McCready. During the trial, Billy Longmire and John McNeil lodged a special defence saying that Alan Murdoch was the one that shot Douglas Bryce, and there was even suggestions that he'd turned the same gun on himself. Ballistics experts determined that the same firearm had been used on both Douglas Bryce and Alan Murdoch. The 3 men standing trial were acquitted of the murder of Douglas Bryce and the attempted murder of Alan Murdoch. It was stated during the trial that the Murdochs had terrorised local families for a number of years. Right after the incident, a 200-strong local mob had driven the Murdochs out of Craigneuk housing scheme. The years that followed would be marred by spurts of violence with those who were involved. Billy Longmire, who ran a local ice cream van, had no less than 4 attempts on his life. He'd been riddled with bullets and managed to survive a number of gun attacks. He had more lives than a cat, apparently. His young nephew, 17-year-old Andrew Longmire, was killed as he walked home from a party in a local Orange Hogs. John Henry Nisbet had at least 2 attempts on his life, and he had to be saved by surgeons both times. He was ambushed in New Mains and nearly stabbed to death. He, along with driver and friend William Lindsay, did an armed robbery of a security van down in Ayrshire, where they stole £50,000. He was also cleared of another armed robbery down in Torquay, Devon. John was involved in a drugs war that would ultimately cost him and William Lindsay their lives. Like I said in a previous video, they were both set up and executed and burned in a field in Elphinstone in Trent. John Nisbet was only 25. He certainly lived a crazy life that ultimately cost him his. Stephen Nisbet was convicted of the horrible murder of 37-year-old David James, along with pals Dominic Ferrier and Stuart Quinn. The 3 men attacked David after earlier watching the Rangers and Celtic game together, punching and kicking him. He was in a bad way and someone tried to stop them, but he was told to get out of the way. The assault continued, and David then had a hot iron pushed against his face several times. David's skin was found on it during the forensic investigation. David was then thrown out a first-floor window. The 3 brutes went outside and continued to stamp on his head. Nearby slabs in the garden were brutally used as a weapon. They were thrown on David's head so hard that there was indentation marks on the grass where they'd missed. The 3 killers fled over the garden fence and into the night. Stephen Nisbet and Stuart Quinn's phone were found at the murder scene. They were sentenced to life for the senseless 2001 murder. Stephen Nisbet was later convicted of running a £1 million heroin operation from his prison cell in HMP Edinburgh along with his associates, and he was given another 10-year prison term.